I thought I had left it all behind. Years of silence. Years of pretending that everything was okay. I had moved on. I had built a life for myself, far away from the man who once controlled everything. Or so I thought. Then, one day, out of nowhere, he found me. The message hit my phone like a slap to the face. The name I hadn't heard in over a decade, stared back at me. Mark. The man who had been my stepfather. The man who had shattered my world when I was just a girl. The man who made me feel worthless, who made me question everything. The man who left, without a word, without an apology, leaving nothing but a trail of broken promises and haunting memories. But there it was, his name. After all these years, he was back. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened the message. It was short, simple. I need to see you. I've been looking for you for years. Please, just let me explain. I froze. What could he possibly say to me after all this time? After everything that happened? The betrayal, the lies, the way he tore my family apart. Why now? Why me? I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Confusion? Disbelief? But most of all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. Fear of what he might say. Fear of what he might do. I sat there, staring at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Should I ignore him? Should I tell him to leave me alone? Or should I hear him out? I had no idea what to do. But there was one thing I knew for sure. This wasn't going to be easy. I couldn't just ignore him. There was something about the message, something that made me pause. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that after all these years, he still had the power to make my heart race. Whatever it was, I couldn't bring myself to press delete. Instead, I typed back, "What do you want from me now?" I almost regretted it as soon as I hit send. Was I ready to reopen the door to a past I had tried so hard to forget? To face the man who had hurt me in ways I couldn't even fully describe? My phone buzzed with his reply almost instantly. "I just want to talk. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to see you. Please." I stared at the words, my mind spiraling. It was like no time had passed. It was the same pleading tone, the same desperate words that had once made me believe in his empty promises. The promises that everything would get better, that he was a changed man, that I should trust him. But this time, I was different. I wasn't the naive teenager I once was. I had grown up, learned how to survive without him, without the lies, without the manipulation. He had left my life for a reason, and I had done my best to leave him behind. Still, part of me wondered why he was doing this now. Was he really sorry? Or was he just trying to make himself feel better? The hours dragged on as I wrestled with the decision. But I knew I couldn't just let it hang in the air. I couldn't live in uncertainty. So, I did it. I agreed to meet him. I arrived at the cafe with my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. My palms were clammy. This was the first time I would see him in nearly 12 years, and I had no idea what to expect. Would he look the same? Would I still see the man who had been so cruel? Or had time changed him? I walked in and scanned the room, and there he was, sitting at a small table by the window, looking out at the street, as though he hadn't changed a bit. His hair had grayed at the temples, and the lines on his face were deeper, but his posture was still the same. Confident, controlled, like nothing had ever happened. Like he hadn't destroyed everything I had ever known. My breath caught in my throat as I stood there, frozen for a moment. He hadn't seen me yet, and for a split second, I thought about walking out. I could still leave, walk away, forget this ever happened. But I didn't. I walked to the table and sat down across from him. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and for the briefest second, I saw something flicker in them. Guilt? Regret? Or was it just the remnants of his old charm? "Emily," he said softly, his voice much gentler than I remembered. "I never thought I'd see you again. I've been searching for you for so long." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. There were so many things I wanted to say, but the words got stuck in my throat. "How have you been?" he asked, his voice still full of that quiet desperation I had once found so comforting. "How have I been?" I repeated, almost laughing, but it came out as a bitter cough. "You really don't get it, do you?" He seemed to shrink back at my tone, but he didn't say anything. He just waited. His eyes were fixed on me, like he was searching for any sign of the daughter he had abandoned. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" I finally asked, my voice rising slightly. "How you left me to pick up the pieces of everything you ruined. My whole life, I had to build it from scratch. And now you just walk in here like nothing happened? Like you can just come back?" His face twisted in pain, but he didn't look away. "I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I've spent all these years regretting what I did. I was wrong. I wasn't a good man to you, Emily. And I can't change the past, but I want to make it right. If you'll let me." The words felt hollow, empty, and yet I found myself listening, drawn into his sincerity. Could he really have changed? I had spent so many years hating him, blaming him for everything. But looking at him now, a part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that people could change. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to let myself fall for this again. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said slowly, my voice trembling for the first time. "But I can't just pretend like I've forgotten everything." He reached across the table, but I pulled my hand back before he could touch me. "You don't get to just walk back into my life like this. You hurt me. You hurt my family. And now you want me to just forgive you?" "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quickly, his voice shaking now. I need to try. Please." I stared at him for what felt like an eternity. My heart was telling me to be strong, to walk away, to not let him get under my skin again. But my mind was telling me that this could be the closure I'd been waiting for. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who had been broken. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll listen. But don't think for a second that this is over." His face softened, and I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I won't let you down." But something inside me told me that it wasn't just going to be that simple. It wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't know if I could trust him again. But I had to know. I had to find out if he was truly sorry, if he was really ready to make things right. We sat there for what felt like hours. The cafe, with its soft background noise and distant hum of conversations, seemed to fade away as I focused on the man across from me. The man who had been my stepfather. The man who had once been so large in my life, a figure of authority, power, and, at times, affection. But that was all before. Before the lies, before the pain, before the years of silence. I watched his hands tremble slightly as he clasped them together, and for the first time in a long while, I saw him not as the imposing figure I remembered but as a man, a broken one, possibly, but still a man. "I know you don't owe me anything," he started, breaking the silence, "but I owe you everything." He let out a shaky breath and looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt. "When I left, I thought it would be easier for you. I thought you'd be better off without me, and I was wrong. I see that now." I wanted to laugh at his naivety, at the absurdity of what he was saying. How could he possibly think that walking away from me, abandoning me like that, would somehow make things better? The years of confusion, the years of trying to fill a hole that had been carved out by his absence, how could he not understand that? But I stayed silent, staring at him, my emotions warring inside me. "I hurt you," he said softly, his voice cracking. "I know that. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that it's the biggest regret of my life. I've carried it with me every day." His words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of them. A small part of me, a part one hadn't let out in years, wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was sorry, that he regretted what he had done. But the other part of me, the part that had spent years building walls around my heart to protect it from him, told me to be cautious. "I don't know how to feel about this," I finally said, my voice quiet. "You left. You left me when I needed you the most. And now, years later, you're telling me that you regret it? That you want to make it right?" I let out a sharp breath, trying to push the growing lump in my throat away. "I don't know if I can just forgive you. I don't know if I can let you back in." He nodded, his face filled with sorrow. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. If you'll let me." There was a silence that felt like it lasted forever. The words "I'm sorry" hung in the air, but they didn't quite feel like enough. They never would be enough, would they? How could they be? How could anything ever make up for the years of emptiness I had lived with? "I just need to know one thing," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Why now? Why after all this time?" His eyes met mine, and I saw a flash of something, vulnerability. For the first time in years, I saw it in his eyes. He was just as human as I was, just as flawed. "I can't change the past, Emily. I can't undo what I've done," he said softly, his voice low. "But I've spent these years thinking about what I could have done differently. I've realized that if I don't try to make amends now, I'll live with the regret forever. I need to fix what I broke, even if I'm the one who broke it." I looked away from him, my mind racing. There was a part of me that wanted to believe him, that wanted to believe that he had truly changed, that he was no longer the man who had left me behind without a second thought. But there was another part of me, the part that had learned to survive on my own, that didn't want to let him in again. The silence stretched on, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Finally, I spoke, my voice shaking just a little. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mark. But I'm willing to listen." I'm willing to try. His face softened, and for a moment, he looked almost relieved. Thank you, he said, his voice full of sincerity. You have no idea what this means to me. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. Relief? Help? Or was it just a sense of resignation, of finally giving in to the years of unresolved pain? I didn't know. But there was one thing I did know. This was just the beginning. This was only the start of a journey I wasn't sure I was ready for. Could I really let him back into my life? Could I let go of all the years of hurt and betrayal? I wasn't sure, but I was willing to find out. It felt strange, sitting across from him again. After all these years of silence, the weight of the past still hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just the fact that he was my stepfather, the man who had abandoned me, left me to pick up the pieces of a broken life. It was the fact that after all this time, he still had the power to make me feel like a scared little girl. I hated that. I hated that I could feel so vulnerable just by his presence. But as the days passed, as we continued to meet, something in me shifted. Slowly, I began to lower the walls I had spent so long building. There were moments when I caught myself laughing at his stories, moments when I felt the warmth of what we could have been. But those moments were fleeting, and each time they came, I quickly pushed them away. I couldn't let myself get caught up in the nostalgia. It had been too long. Too much had happened. Still, I couldn't deny that there was something different about him now. He wasn't the same man who had left me to fend for myself. He wasn't the same man who had turned his back on me without a second thought. Maybe it was just that he was trying to atone for his past. Maybe it was guilt driving him. But whatever it was, it didn't matter. I couldn't afford to let him get too close again. And yet, as the days went on, the connection between us grew stronger. I found myself wanting to believe in his sincerity. He wasn't asking for my forgiveness, not directly anyway, but I could see it in his eyes, the remorse that had settled there over the years. He was trying to show me, not just tell me, that he was a different person now. He was trying to prove that he could be the father I had always needed. But could I trust him? Could I really believe that someone like him could change? It was a Tuesday afternoon when he invited me over to his apartment for dinner. I hadn't been to his place in years, and the thought of it filled me with a sense of dread. But this time, there was no escape. He had made it clear that he wanted to show me that he was trying, that he wanted to build something between us again. I didn't know what that something was, but I had to see it for myself. When I arrived, the apartment was different than I remembered. It was warmer, cozier, an almost stark contrast to the cold, sterile place I had last seen it. The furniture was arranged differently, and the space had an air of comfort I hadn't associated with him before. "Emily," he said when I stepped through the door, smiling softly. "I'm glad you came." I smiled back, even though my insides were in turmoil. "It looks different," I said, trying to sound casual. "I've changed," he replied, his voice sincere. "A lot has changed." I nodded but didn't say anything. I could feel the old tension between us, the weight of everything that had happened. But for some reason, this time, it didn't feel as suffocating. Maybe it was the fact that I could see the effort he was putting into this, into trying to make things right. Or maybe it was just the fact that, deep down, I had always wanted to believe that people could change. Dinner was surprisingly normal. We talked about trivial things, like the weather, the food, our daily lives. But beneath the surface, I could feel the undercurrent of something deeper, something unspoken. Neither of us was willing to bring up the past just yet, and I was okay with that. For once, I wasn't ready to confront it. I just wanted to be in the moment, to pretend that things were different, that we could be normal. But as the evening wore on, I could see him watching me, waiting for a sign that I was ready to let him in, a sign that I was ready to forgive. It was all there, in his eyes. That hope, that desperate longing, and for the first time, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall I had built around myself, a small crack, but it was enough to let a little light in. By the time the evening ended, I found myself standing at the door, facing him once again. I could see the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability that he had buried for so long. He wasn't the same man who had hurt me all those years ago. He was someone else, someone I didn't fully understand yet. "Thank you for tonight," I said, my voice soft. "I didn't expect this." "You're welcome," he said, his voice warm. "I just want you to know that I'm here, whenever you're ready." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I wasn't ready yet. But maybe, just maybe, I was starting to get there. I stepped outside, my heart racing. I didn't know what I had expected from tonight. Maybe I had expected things to be just as they were, or maybe I was hoping for something more. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure. The silence that followed felt heavier than usual. But this time, it wasn't fear that weighed me down. It was something else, something unfamiliar, something that could either be the beginning of something new, or the end of something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I walked away from his apartment, unsure of what came next, but knowing that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Days turned into weeks, and the unease that had once consumed me began to subside, albeit slowly. I still wasn't sure what I was doing. I was confused, torn between the girl who had spent years harboring resentment and the woman who was trying to heal, trying to rebuild the relationship that had been shattered so long ago. Each time Mark and I met, I could see the effort he was putting in, and it stirred something inside me. It wasn't just guilt. It was something more, something I wasn't quite ready to face. He was there for me in ways I hadn't expected. He listened when I spoke, not with judgment, but with understanding. He had always been a man who saw the world through his own lens, but now he was seeing me, truly seeing me, for the first time. I couldn't deny it any longer. He was changing, and part of me was desperate to believe it was real. One evening, we decided to take a walk. It was a calm evening, the kind that felt timeless, as if nothing could disturb the peace between us. We walked in silence at first, the sound of our footsteps mingling with the rustling leaves in the autumn breeze. It was nice, and yet, there was still this strange tension between us. He looked at me, as though searching for something, and then his voice broke the silence. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," Mark said quietly. "About us. About everything." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure what to say. The words "I've forgiven you" still felt too heavy to utter, but untrying seemed so weak. He had been gone for so long. The years had done their damage, leaving scars that couldn't simply be erased. "I've been trying to make sense of it all," I said, my voice low, tentative. "But I don't know how. I can't just forget everything that happened. You hurt me, Mark. I don't know how to forgive that." "I don't expect you to forget," he replied quickly, his voice thick with emotion. "I just want a chance to show you that I'm not that man anymore, that I'm not the person who left. I can't change the past, but I can try to make the future better." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning, but I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do with them. Forgiveness didn't come easily. It never had. And yet, here I was, standing next to him, listening to him plead for a chance. A chance I wasn't sure I was ready to give. "I don't know if I can trust you again," I whispered, barely able to meet his eyes. "I don't know if I can just let everything go and pretend like it didn't matter." He stepped closer, his voice soft but determined. "I don't want you to pretend, Emily. I just want to be part of your life again. I want to prove that I've changed. I want to make things right." I swallowed hard. The words I had been holding back for so long now bubbled to the surface. "But how can you prove it? How do you show me that you've changed when everything you've done in the past says the opposite?" Mark took a deep breath, looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered. "I don't know," he said slowly, his gaze unwavering, "but I'm willing to try, for as long as it takes. I know it won't be easy, but I have to try." It was in that moment that I realized the truth. I wanted to believe him, but I was terrified. Terrified that this was just another game, that he would disappoint me again. But as he stood there, his eyes full of sincerity, I realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the same person he used to be. Maybe he wasn't just trying to manipulate me. Maybe he truly wanted to change. But how could I ever know for sure? The doubt lingered, but so did something else. A spark, a glimmer of hope. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, and it scared me more than anything else. Because if I let him back in, I wasn't just opening a door. I was opening my heart again, and that wasn't something I was ready to risk. "I don't know if I can give you what you want," I said quietly, my voice shaky. "But I'm willing to try too. For us. For me." His eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimmer of the man I had once loved. "That's all I ask for, Emily. Just a chance." The next few weeks were a mix of small, quiet steps forward. We met more often, and the distance between us began to shrink. We shared memories, laughed, and even argued about trivial things, as though we were starting over from the beginning. There was something incredibly strange about it all. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it felt like we were building something new, something that wasn't based on the past but on the possibility of a future. But as much as I wanted to believe in this new version of him, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The past was still there, lingering between us, and I knew that sooner or later, it was going to catch up with us. That moment came when we were sitting together one evening, quietly enjoying dinner, when Mark finally asked the question I had been avoiding. "What's it going to take, Emily? What do I have to do for you to trust me again? To believe that I'm not the same person who hurt you? I felt the weight of his words pressing down on me, and for a moment I couldn't speak. How could I trust him again? How could I ever forget what he had done? I don't know, I said softly, looking at him, trying to find the right words. But I need to know that you're really here, for good. Not just when it's convenient. I need to know that you're not going to disappear again. Mark looked at me, his expression serious. I can't promise that I won't make mistakes, Emily, but I can promise you that I'm not going anywhere. And here for the long haul. The silence that followed was heavy, but this time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like the first step in something new. Maybe it wasn't the easiest path. Maybe it was filled with uncertainties. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I knew this was the only chance we had. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. The silence between us now felt different. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no tension, no fear, just a quiet understanding that something important had begun. I had agreed to try, but the road ahead was unclear, and neither of us knew where it would take us. But as the days passed, I couldn't help but feel that I was starting to trust him again. Slowly, cautiously. Mark had been doing everything he could to prove that he had changed, and it was working, a little. I could see it in his actions. The way he was patient with me, the way he respected my boundaries, the way he listened when I spoke. But trust, once shattered, isn't easily rebuilt. It's like trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces. Even when the picture starts to form, you can't help but feel the emptiness in the gaps. Every time he smiled, every time he said the right thing, I wanted to believe it. But a voice in the back of my mind whispered that I couldn't be fooled again. That I couldn't just forget everything he had done. The years of hurt, the betrayal, the way he had walked away without a word, those things didn't just disappear because he wanted to make things right. One night, as we sat together in the small, cozy restaurant where we had shared our first dinner since we started meeting again, Mark reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine. It was a simple gesture, but it still made my heart skip a beat. Emily, he said softly, looking me directly in the eye. I know this isn't easy for you. I know that everything I've done is hard to forget. And I don't expect you to forgive me just because I ask. But I need you to know that I'm trying. I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I swallowed, my throat tight. His words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't some fleeting apology or half-hearted attempt to fix things. He was serious. And that scared me. Mark, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You don't know what this feels like. You don't know what it was like when you just disappeared. When I thought I had no one. It's not that easy. It's not just about forgiving you. It's about whether or not I can believe in you again. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken emotion. Mark's face softened, and he withdrew his hand, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. This wasn't just hard for me. It was hard for him too. I know it's not easy, he said quietly, his voice strained, and I don't expect you to let me back in overnight. But I want to try. For you. For us. I can't change the past, but I want to make sure I'm here for the future. I don't want to lose you again. I felt a lump form in my throat as I stared at him. The words I wanted to say caught in my chest. He wasn't asking for my forgiveness, not in the way I thought he would. He wasn't pleading for absolution. He was asking for a chance I wasn't sure I could give him. But what was I really afraid of? Was it the fear of being hurt again? The fear of trusting someone who had proven untrustworthy before? Or was it that, deep down, I wanted to believe that people could change? I didn't have the answers, not yet. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. It was about whether or not I could open myself up again, let go of the past, and trust that he wouldn't hurt me again. Could I risk it? The next few days felt like a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Mark continued to show up, continued to prove that he was trying, but the more I saw him, the more I realized how much of my life I had spent running from the things that had hurt me. From him, from the past. I thought I had let go of it all. I thought I had moved on. But as I spent more time with him, I realized that some things don't just disappear. They linger, like ghosts, haunting the spaces between us. One evening, I found myself walking through the park near my apartment, the cool night air brushing against my skin. I needed to clear my head, to think. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I looked, it was another message from Mark. I've been thinking. I know this might be too soon, but I was wondering if you wanted to spend the weekend together. We could go away. Just the two of us. No distractions. We could start over, really start over. My heart skipped a beat. It was a simple invitation, but it felt loaded with so much more. It wasn't just about getting away. It was about what that weekend could mean. It was about the leap we both have to take. trusting each other, starting fresh. But could I really do that? Could I really put myself out there again, knowing how easily everything could fall apart? I stood there in the quiet park, the weight of the decision heavy on my chest. The world around me was still, the night air thick with anticipation. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't just facing Mark's past, I was facing my own. I texted back, my fingers trembling as I typed. Okay, let's do it. The weekend arrived faster than I expected. As I packed my bag, I felt a rush of nerves flood my body. What was I doing? What if this was a mistake? But even as the doubts crept in, I knew I had made the right choice. I had to try. If I didn't take this step, I would never know if things could be different. Mark picked me up early on Saturday morning, his smile warm and genuine. For a moment, I almost believed that everything could be as it should have been. But as we drove away from the city, the doubts lingered. Could we really start over? Could we really build something out of the wreckage of our past? And would I be strong enough to let go of the pain, to forgive him, to trust him again? The answer, I realized, was that I wasn't sure. But I had to face it. I had to confront the past, confront him, and confront the one thing I had spent my entire life avoiding, letting myself truly heal.